poetry before there was a black arts movement. I'd been reading poetry using a relentlessly Catholic method. I simply read the entire 811 section of the Queensborough Public Library, starting with Leonie Adams and continuing book by book through the alphabet. He goes on to list his favorites. Favorite poets, favorite anthologies on the Imagists, the Black Mountain poets, the writers whose work shaped the Harlem Renaissance. And then he punctuates his list with this pause. Quote, "Nevertheless, I was also sometimes overwhelmed with a sense of isolation. These are the kinds of moments that physically strike me when I think about Lorenzo Thomas's work. I think about the crescendos and the rests, the posture simultaneously of passion and apartness. I think about what one sees from that particular position and what one longs for. I feel the contraction and the softening of these poems. I feel the body gathered upright in a room full of speech, full of poem, waiting to happen and be shared. And I'm struck by the imperatives of his work, the careful and unpretentious authority the poems deliver him to, like the arrival point of this particular talk. Quote, "It is a matter of fact that it is up to us to define tradition. It is up to us." Alden Nielsen has done the important work of editing a tremendous 500-page collection of these poems so that they may find readership and life beyond the community of friends who loved Lorenzo Thomas dearly and who are gathered here tonight. We are very proud to be part of this, and I'm going to hand things over to Alden Nielsen, who will introduce our readers.
Thank you very much. Patricia hoped we'd start by 8:15. It's not 8:15. I want to start by acknowledging a number of people. I will not be acknowledging everybody I should acknowledge just because there's so many of them. But first of all, of course, the Poetry Project itself, which is always a great supporter of Lorenzo Thomas. Many of you know that Ann Waldman and Louis Warch published his first two bound publications that I can find a copy of anywhere, for example. And the Poetry Project was always a home to Lorenzo Thomas. And this is the second or third Lorenzo Thomas related thing that the Poetry Project has sponsored, and I'm hoping there'll be more in the future. I also want to acknowledge the presence of Cecilio Thomas, who is Lorenzo Thomas's brother. Those of you who are familiar with his work. Those of you who know Lorenzo's work have seen Cecilio's visual art, particularly in a couple of the early texts. And two of those illustrations will reappear in the collected that comes out from Wesley. And of course, I want to acknowledge Wesley for supporting this project. Peter Gizzi for telling me I should talk to Suzanne Tamminen about this thing. Charles Bernstein, because I first started seeing the poetry of Lorenzo Thomas when I was a kid myself in journals like Who Review, which Ethelbert Miller and Amos Subotin edited in other places. But I hadn't met him yet until one of the first MLAs I ever went to, Charles Bernstein, was kind enough to introduce us, and we became very fast friends. I used to joke that Lorenzo and I were kind of a tag team at conferences. It seemed where, no matter what the conference was, either he gave a talk and I responded to him, or I gave a talk and he responded to me. My favorite one of these instances, neither one of us was responding to each other. First AWP I ever went to, almost the last, but the first one I ever went to, Lorenzo and I were a two-person panel on the work of Sterling Brown, which of course they stuck at 8:30 in the morning. We got there, and who was already there but Lucille Clifton? Because Lucille had been one of Sterling Brown's students at Howard University. And so the chain continues. I especially want to acknowledge Laura Vrana, who's my co-editor on this project and has done just wonderful work, and will be doing more in the future. Laura is teaching in Mobile, Alabama. This means she's also voting in Mobile, Alabama, which is almost as important. But that's why Laura couldn't be here tonight. And as I said, she'll be involved in further events. Those of you who are lovers of Lorenzo Thomas's work, Keep an eye out. Once the book is actually coming out, we're planning to have a couple of conference panels. So if you ever thought about writing an essay about Lorenzo Thomas, please let me know about that fact so we can maybe get you on one of these panels. And I hope we'll have some other readings around town. I'm sorry to say, Ross couldn't be here tonight. He had a family obligation. But the readers tonight are going to be in this order: Lydia Cortes, Charles Bernstein, Erica Hunt, William J. Harris, who doesn't like to be called Billy Joe in public, apparently. Patricia Spears Jones, who's fine with being called Patricia Spears Jones in public. And Tracy Morris. I have that running order up here, and I'm going to ask that each of you, when you complete your reading, please mention the name of the next person, because us poets are sort of a forgetful bunch. We never know when it's our turn and so on and so on. I was joking, the night before we did the David Bromwich reading here, we had the one in Philadelphia. Whoever was reading forgot to read the name of the next person, at which point Jack Crick turns and looks at me and says, Alvin? I said, no, I'm tomorrow night in New York, and so on. I'm going to read two quick poems. There's so many more things I want to say because Lorenzo was such a brilliant writer, a brilliant artist, and a brilliant friend. I'd actually meant to start out musically. As far as I know, Lorenzo, Cecile could correct me if I'm wrong with this, I think he only played two musical instruments at all. One was kazoo. The other was harmonica. And I learned this when we had a panel Carla Harriman organized at AWP some years ago, during which one of the members of the band Lorenzo Thomas was in as a teenager popped up. And he later gave me 2 or 3 tapes that he had, which are now on Penn Sound. So if you want to know what the teenage Lorenzo Thomas sounded like playing kazoo and harmonica and singing, go to Penn Sound. I'm going to read just 2 poems, partly because each one of them has a particular dedication. One of my real regrets is that I didn't get this done while Ted Greenwald was still with us. Ted Greenwald was a close associate of Lorenzo from the very earliest days. So I'm going to read first this poem, Linear Variation, for Ted Greenwald. 1. Here is a sentence. A rose and a vase are there. I'm writing this poem on the run. I don't even stop to breathe, hardly. Inheritors of a common tradition, teeth set on edge. This book is to carry with one by the waters. Oh, see the miles, and his gray sweats come up the weed path. His smelly ease is his perversion, and it pants for him. He's come so far that his strong legs may buckle so he can sleep in Africa's dreary, as when a man named Rhodes from Baltimore faces the ruins of a village. It is this melancholy thing, this deviation without possibility. Notice them now as he go along. 2. Here is another sentence. This one is truer. This is a damn presumptuous thing for me to be saying. Don't knock at thought just on the baldness of it. Think of a whole line of blue-shirted track stars. They sweat in the eternal Roman sun, all of them running for the United States. Or, in another way, I love a woman that I myself created. She gleans the ripe ears of my celibacy, and the laws of 40 states prevent our marriage. The landscape's thoroughly tropic where she meets me, ablaze with capes and crocs, Angora sweaters. Maybe this old Greek mama in the quaking subway could let me know the lineage of creams. She with the handbag full of Aegean fruit, who ignores the public and simply eats. The second poem I'm going to read grows out of the work of Charles Gale, who's incredibly important to Lorenzo, and indeed to New York City. If you know his albums, Homeless, Testament, and so forth, you know this work. If you're a long-time New Yorker, you probably encountered Charles on the streets with his horn at some point or another, possibly with that clown nose that he sometimes wore when he was performing. This is called Spirits You All, the Charles Gale Trio at the Houston Jazz Festival, September 16, 1992, for Charles Gale. And one of the things I love here, having grown up the way I grew up, I was raised in captivity by Baptists, is the use of church as a verb. All it is, church, if you hear it, he church. He concert hall, flame breath to sidewalk, breeze through a saxophone to deep pulsing tunnels. The people whipped by the money changers, beat down by money, hang wearily awaiting darkness, bats. He church, speaking no words. Their souls are not silent. He makes audible the sonar of thousands. The horn coaxes measured Jesus. Sing, Gale, angular, erect, vattle cherry, dances bass, bells like the click of cowries flash like sparks around his instrument. Mark Edwards reaches for a distant drum beat, snaring it, then lets it go to fly around this space. Come to think of it, last time I was in New York, I saw Mark Edwards play, close parentheses. Inside his saxophone are all the voices, spirits, you all, the shrieks of Daddy Grace and Grandma's moan. Young girls, all that is truly precious of the earth, loud and laughing, who do not know the troubles of this world, glowing with bells in their ears, fluttering bird-like in girl conspiracies. From concert hall under red lights to sidewalks exiled from neon. If you can hear it, spirits, you all dance from this saxophone. Cold light and falling darkness. Under the shutter of Suburbans fuming on the overpass, a woman in a carton she might have asked a husband to break down and stack beside the drive for heavy trash, busies her hands folding rags with gracious care into a plastic bag. Her heart just idles, and her mind curls up around a picture of a small white-clapboard missionary Baptist church, nestled in hope beside a country road, where the choir voice was all the sound of life to laughing girls and soft brown faces, some of them softened only when they sang. Church don't mean religion, may even be a verb. Sleeping in fits, a man 10 feet away wrapped in a sheet of cardboard does not dream that lobe was leached in floods of liquid flame that made 1,000 nights like this instant forgettings and survivable. He does not see himself in marcelled hair, long, gleaming Stacey Adams Cordovans as dangerous as dreaming U-boats on the dreamland floor. As the orchestra, high trumpet, hoarse trombone slides into cherry pink and apple blossom white. You think these cracked feet have no mambo memory? Well, no, they don't. He never did that, but he saw it in a movie once, a century ago. He churched and trembles, joy and struggle, joy and struggle, here where night's a cloak of heavy hopelessness, and day a flash of puzzled patterns lining it, a fashion, such ill-fitting materiality that even those who grab the most see themselves scrambling to barely cover their behinds. And now the brazen shofar of a horn as the commuter bats unfold themselves into the evening and step along the sidewalk and do not look around or down, and if they do, don't see what you can hear. Spiraling at a Charles Gale saxophone, spirits, y'all, know where it comes from. Church, if you feel it. Next up is Lydia Cortes, and thank you very much for coming today.
I've been feeling a little dizzy, and I got dizzy right before I came here, and I don't know why, because I usually don't get dizzy. But if I should fall before I wake, have me buried in this outfit, and I'd like to be laid out here. The wake will be here. Okay, Kyle? I knew a little bit about Lorenzo Thomas, but not very much. I knew that I liked his work. I just saw Tracy. I knew that I loved his work, but not, I didn't know very much about him. And at one point, I think it was 2 years ago, February, the Poetry Project was offering a workshop that Alden was giving here on an evening, on a particular evening, and I think it was February.
Very much so.
I'm sorry?
It was very much February.
Okay, it was cold. So I called up and I said, is there still an opening? And one of my favorite people here said that there was, and so I signed up for it. And then she called me up later and she said, somebody canceled out and they didn't want their money back. They said that they wanted to go to someone who wants to take the workshop. Would you like to take it and have it paid for? And I said, oh, no. I said, yes, of course, and thank you so much. And please give me that person's name so I can get in touch with them and thank them and tell them I'm the one who got it. Anyway, that workshop that Alden gave was amazing. So I went from liking the poet to loving the poet. And Alden was so amazingly prepared. The workshop was just wonderful, and it was just a shame that I think there were 4 of us in that workshop. What a waste of talent and knowledge. But then I really fell in love with Lorenzo Thomas's work. So I think I have 3 poems I'm going to read. The first one is called Hollandaise Salsa. Life, Lord, is beautiful. Ricardo and I wandering around find chilly people and the salsa sound near Lissus Plain. Amazing. We go in and bullshit Texas style. Oh yes, in Amsterdam the streets are colonies named for the late empire, colonized by landlord greed for rent. T-Coop downtown. Round town the rent is steep and squatters boggling police with signs on F. Bolstraat. Bezet and portents tell me this is usual business. Ricardo tells me, don't forget yourself. These people don't like you, vato. They made a fortune off your ancestors, these Dutch. So many streets in Amsterdam bear names of colonies, and Amsterdammers are surprised. Terrorism and hate in Holland? South Moluccans? Who in hell is that? What else did they expect? They named these streets in all their greed of glory someone else's pain. At 4 a.m., a couple of Suriname boys sit around Montplain and chat. They've nowhere to go, no flat, no blonde Dutch girl, no customers for hash. They sit and chat. No dark girl either. Lord, life can be like that. And yes, I walk into tomorrow's obligations. I watch the ducks fret in Sartfate Park. I call for Jessica. Of course, she's late. A black man's jogging and brown children squeal. I recognize this. Walking this Sunday along Albert Cuyp, the market vanished into square Dutch homes. The caseco, the salsa leaking out of windows of the lost in their Sunday dreaming. I'm home. The God's Own Privilege, Helena, Arkansas. Oh, don't you hear me crying? Chester Burnett. Orion boldly strides the southern sky and walks the darkened sea. Lydia, a troubled year to learn the spider's art, hidden in peril, safe in perdition's tangles, a boasting penitence. It is less punishment than polishing. There are worse tortures than minute memories, brightly vanishing into a golden dusk, tie-dyed and swirling to the grateful dead. I sit, pencil in hand, tangled in 30 feet of tape, respooling the cassette, twirling and straightening, rewinding songs I already know. Shadows of lava lights, syncopated dance of golden palms, methadrine gospel breakdown, echoes of Lydian song. Would there be thunderbolts? Would there be lightning? The long, slow freight with its careening lamp, a ponderous rumble following, pathway of the spark, going on 300-400 miles, remembering thin nights in Colorado, the night we lay on the banks of the same river, afraid to go in. Would there be lightning? Would the next step take us vanishing into the pearl gray sky? The would-be thunder waits each corner of the sky. Lydia, I learned to touch you, soft as you touched her, as you touched me, Lydia, like a slip of light at the edge of an opening door, trying to keep the quietness inside the day that folds overnight, holding tightly a scarf of starlight, moving towards the cool of the spectrum, dazzling motels on old postcards. Red light begins to harden, waiting to shatter like a vase, priceless only in memory, gone rigid in a clumsy kitten's path. Lydia, how you touch me without touching. It's the light from each of us, blending heat. Lydia softens, and so the strings of light, invisible but imagined, unbroken, between the pointed appearances of Lydia, brilliant gold hieroglyphs around your waist, glimmering and bright, then twirl into the darkness again of the flat, untroubled foil of afternoon. Lydia, your strobe-like attention, giggling beams and vanishings like money that outshine the moon, as is a muted man disguised in curbstone wisdom, treasured vestiges of light and foreign lifetimes, the light that merely waits and reappears, the spark of knowing what it looks like already, so the photograph does not disappoint you. Lydia, the light that merely waits, was not guardian or guide. Isis, aspen, inside the Zodiaco. If there are worlds to travel and the words collect. While madness reigns, these madmen ruined the age, not even they are content. Things perish, begging the sky for rebirth. Mountains demand RSVP, and poisons flood the clouds. The fishes ignore everyone in their portable ocean. That is beauty given for pain. Bread wars astonish the people, kill them too. They want someone to talk to, even if just to complain that their history lies all degenerate under the cough and the nasality of the flowers, wanting someone to talk to. A young girl turns to a tree in the sunlight. This is magic, a world and relation. The tree chokes and dies in the air. This is madness and greed. Science fails. Other witchcrafts become monsters, while people starving for love, for affection, for lunch, crying, skill is no longer sufficient, nor efficiency, nor politeness. The curse has fallen now on the mad. Their children purposely starving to widen the scope of their minds, asking them poisoned Asian riddles. Must they seek madness now to tool eternity, conspicuously invisible among the lustful dead? Organization, mass whoredom. From my closet in the anonymous kingdom, I wondered, can this be the very mysterious planet of sunlight, shadow, and rain, the shimmering light of the fishes, annoyance? Even after they destroy it, there are subtle effects of the air and the weather, light, sunlight, shadow, rain. Not even these madmen can duplicate it. Learn Zen to remain unforgiven, destroying life to make a living so proudly while madness reigns. Bernstein.
guess the voice we all want to hear is the one who's not here, Lorenzo's voice. And there's nothing we can do that can come up to that, but we can remember that voice, that presence. I want first to thank Alden Nielsen for doing this book, which is an extraordinary feat of love and generosity. And also for his doing the collection of Lorenzo's music work, and also for his anthologies and his criticism, because I don't get a chance to say that about Alden Nielsen that much, but I appreciate it enormously. He's made a wealth of information available, and
we appreciate the correct pronunciation of my first name, by the way.
You mentioned Ted Greenwald. That's how I met Lorenzo, because Ted and Lorenzo went to Queens College together, and they became good friends. And I was very close to Ted and had hundreds of conversations. And I don't think there was very many that he didn't mention Lorenzo Thomas. How is he doing? What's he doing? And then I kind of put him in touch with Mr. Nielsen in this book. And then for the last many years of his life, he kept saying, and what's going on with that book? Where is that collected? I said, you can call him, I'll call. But he loved Lorenzo, and it was a very powerful relationship for me to enter into through him. And it's great to be here with so many old friends, people who go back a long time, we together and through Lorenzo tonight. I want to talk here, though, about not only my relationship to Lorenzo, but also a little bit about his work as a critic and a poetics person and a person who supported poetry in the United States, because he did an enormous amount, unheralded, unpaid, unrecognized, including all of those conventions of the MLA where he served on committees that supported African-American poetry, radical African-American poetry's presence at the MLA, and wrote essays. And he just did that from his post at the University of Houston, downtown, not the famous creative writing program, which we had no use, as far as I could see, and as far as he could see, for the person who was the main poet in Houston during his lifetime. And I always said to him, aren't you annoyed? He said, no. And I can't live the way he lived that way, because I get annoyed about a lot less. But that's the way he felt. Ted and I started a series in 1978. It's actually almost exactly 51 years ago, November 13th. One of the first readings that we organized at the Ear Inn was with Lorenzo Thomas, and he read with Kathy Acker. It's interesting to think about that reading, that he put the two of them on together. And it was a good reading. Then when and it's on Penn Sound, sure. And then, because I recorded those early readings. And then when I got my job at Buffalo, one of the first poets that I had, and again, November 1991, just after I arrived, I had Lorenzo come in my first semester to speak in the Wednesdays at 4 series. And he gave a reading, and he came to my graduate seminar. And what he did in the graduate seminar informed all of my graduate teaching, as well as my essays, especially my teaching after, because he talked about the beat that went on in the work song. I still remember, because I do this in almost every class. In the middle of the class, he would talk about the work songs, and he'd say, and you know, it's not a beat that's related to the whatever you think a beat is. It was riveting, and I just always repeated it and attributed it to him. And he also talked about Melvin Tolson, who I went on to write about, but I did not know about Melvin Tolson until Lorenzo Thomas told me about him, and Sterling Brown, who I didn't fully understand until that context, and especially James Weldon Johnson's The Creation. So these are the people he talked about in my graduate seminar, and I still think that that's kind of a fundamental part of poetics that's important to all of us in this room and in this place, the St. Mark's Poetry Project, as our history. And then we had the chance to publish Extraordinary Measures with the University of Alabama Press, Hank Lazar and me, and that's a great book. And I said to him, sure, we asked, do you want, have a press that was different and so on? We have a great series, but it was right at the beginning. We weren't a great series when we asked, and he said, no, you asked, and you didn't consider anything else. It's an honor to have published that book, which is still in print, and I encourage you to get if you don't know it. So in that light, I'm going to read his introduction to Chances Are Few, second edition, 2003. What poetry is exactly about, or what it's for, has never actually occupied me too much of my thinking. I have assumed the answer to those questions has always been anything and everything. Poetic license simply amounts to what the old people in New Orleans say when babies cry. Sure, you right, darling. Then let them know you hear. Let them know you hear. Some people would have poetry limit itself to pleasing the quick-witted mind, others to exploring the ever-fearful soul. Some would permit those activities as long as artists also help us confront larger social issues. A good job for whoever is brave enough to have it. The modern world, what T.S. Eliot taught us to call our civilization, began in 1492 with a series of cultural collisions that continue to reverberate. We've had 500 grim years of progress, a kaleidoscope of ancient fears and hatreds, bright visions and hopeful dreams, justifiable suspicions and ordinary greed, constantly recycled as history becomes everyday life and vice versa. Now, that's something to talk about. But I never felt comfortable telling anyone that I dreamed of a grand purpose for my poems. I don't go about looking to write poems. Poems simply appeared when it was necessary to write them. When something happened to me physically, emotionally, perhaps spiritually, that demanded that I have something to say. I found myself wandering around in America, looking at what there was to be looked at, following some path determined by curiosity and chance, the X and Y of human being. Maybe it was just the restlessness of youth. Youth is devoted to adventure but aspires to knowledge. Usually, of course, all one gets is experience. Always it has seemed sensible to me to accept the proposition that the poet is the man who suffers, that to speak of that suffering helps us to understand how such experiences shape people and the world. Understanding such things might teach us how to make life less painful, our relationships less brutal, as our nightly entertainment and the watchman's alarms both reveal, our society is a society full of brutalities, decked out in excuses. True civility would show us how to install intelligence and wisdom in the place now haughtily occupied by destructive sophistication. Wisdom, according to the Proverbs of Solomon, quote, crieth at the gates, at the entry of the city. Question is, who listens? Writing poems involves that desperate attempt to pass through sophistication into wisdom. So the poet, disdaining fashion, tries on hats and costumes, modes and forms, takes soundings, There is always the need to find and recognize beauty. Beauty, wherever we are. And as Ricardo Muro insists, there is the need to tell the truth. Looking again at the poems in Chances Are Few, a title that pays homage to the hypnotically beautiful, gospel-tinged acetylene blues of Babyface Willette, I believe that what is said there is at least honest, and I think mostly true. Anyway, as Ned Sparks puts it in the original Imitation of Life, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.